everybody. I'm Suzette Martinez Standring, and welcome to It's All Right with Suzette, where we today have a wonderful author who will really excite adventurers and hikers. I have today with me Cheryl Suchors, who is the author of 48 Peaks, Hiking and Healing in the White Mountains. And I have to tell you, her successful quest to summit all 48 mountains, all 48 peaks of the White Mountains in New Hampshire will keep you breathless. I know it did for me. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce Cheryl Suchors today. Cheryl, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, Suzette, I'm delighted.
I know that your book releases this month, September, and I know that Kirkus gave it a fabulous review. I believe one of the sentences was, an inspiring yet relatable true story with exciting scenes and plenty of heart. And I felt exactly that way. It was a real page turner. Also, BookBub listed it as one of the 10 life-changing memoirs to pick up this fall. You must feel so proud.
Oh, I feel really fortunate. I do. That was just such a wonderful thing. Both of those wonderful things that happened.
On so many levels, your book is inspiring. I think that it excites adventurers and hikers. It is also inspiring to me because at the age of 58, you had made all 48 summits in the year 2008, was it?
That's right, exactly.
And you had gone through grief, you had overcome breast cancer, you had lost some beloved friends. So that was really, it's just an amazing book. I know that your background is that you have degrees from Harvard and from Smith College, and that you describe your journey as a detour into business for 20 years until you reached your true love of writing. So tell us really about your book, 48 Peaks.
Well, I took a hike in 1998 that changed my life. I was at the time just turning 48 years old. I was in the midst of a large career transition, moving from that world of business and a long and productive career to trying to do something I had always wanted to do, to write a novel. Since I was a child, I had loved books. They were like my most constant companions in a family that was peripatetic. I mean, I went to 4 different grade schools and 4 different high schools. So, and in my family, my brother was a lot older, 9 years, and my sister had Down syndrome. So a lot of my companionship really came from books. So there I was, like following my bliss, right? Well, kind of not so much actually, because I had thought it would be a slam dunk to write a novel. I had been a good writer in business, and I quickly discovered that this was not the same thing at all. It was like expository writing and writing fiction were as alike as construction projects and gazelles. And so I was now faced with the hardest job I'd ever had, writing this novel, and it left me feeling like a unskilled, possibly untalented baby novelist. So
now, what year did you actually start writing? Because I think this is really reassuring for people who struggle along with all kinds of obstacles. What year did you seriously start to write?
On this book?
No, in general.
In general. Well, I decided, oh gosh, now I'm trying to remember. That was around, I think, 1996,
okay,
something like that.
So, regarding 48 Peaks, for all the struggles that you were going with, and I know that your mother's passing away was a real source of grief for you, and other struggles followed. Why scale mountaintops?
Well, I had learned after my mother died that something physical could really help with grief. I had started out working with a trainer. And you know, I mean, grief is something we feel in our bodies, right? It's not just a mental or emotional thing. And sometimes that was the only way that I felt I could kind of get through grief. And so I had
by physical activity.
by physical activity, and then combined with this need for feeling successful, which I so obviously wasn't in the early years of my writing career, I decided that I needed something concrete and physical and hard so that when I finished it, I would really feel success. And it was a bit of a process of elimination that it came down to hiking. I had wanted to swim, and I'd started off swimming, but then I had to have shoulder surgery for a rotator cuff and other things. And I had loved tennis, but then I had to have tennis elbow surgery. So I thought, okay, what body parts are left, you know? And so I chose hiking.
Well, you have a real gift of metaphor. You have some wonderful phrases in your book. And when you set out to go hiking, it is so vivid, the physical challenges of just getting over these boulders and scaling these ledges and looking down, you know, from such heights. I mean, it's so real. And it's interesting that you say that you were going, you know, that you needed something physical and difficult to overcome your grief, which tells me it was pretty deep. But you went through your own struggles with breast cancer and the physical challenges, and that was an amazing part of the book, how you still managed to want to do that in view of the physical limitations and recovery that you went through. Can you talk about that?
Sure. You know, I had already, before breast cancer, I had hiked 5 of the 4,000 footers. And they connected me to nature in a way that was just thrilling for me. And especially after breast cancer, I really, really needed to feel success at something again. And so even though my body wasn't really quite ready and I had lots of side effects, I needed to get back to those mountains, not just for the success, but also because it was so nourishing to me. It was kind of a soul-to-soul connection with a mountain. And once I was able to kind of drop down into that well, it filled up an inner reservoir of energy that was very depleted for me at that time, and gave me a sense that, okay, this was really hard now, but one day it might get a little easier.
That's really amazing. Really amazing. And the way you trained for it, I think that the viewers should know that each of the summits that you scaled were at least
4,000 feet or over.
4,000 feet or over, in order to get you elite membership into, what was
the 4,000 footer club. Yes.
4,000 footer club. That was amazing. And you did it in 10 years.
Took me 10 years.
But, you know, through all of this, there was a lot of struggle and self-reflection, and friendship plays a huge part in your book. Can you tell us why?
Absolutely. Well, since I was a child, friends had been really important to me. You know, when you move around a lot, you desperately need to make friends quickly and kind of hold on to them to feel like you belong in a new place. And I had a great role model in my mother. She moved even more often than I did. I mean, before I was born, of course. And she always managed to make at least 1 or 2 really close friends in each place, and she held on to them after we moved. So I learned a lot from her. On the hikes, my family couldn't go with me on every hike. Some of the hikes were just too long and too arduous for me to go by myself. And so I needed companions. and especially after breast cancer, I needed people to carry some of my gear. I couldn't manage it. And friends just came through for me in a really, really big way. Always have in my life.
That's wonderful. And yet, even with the connection to your friends, you had to endure more grief when you had lost a couple of them to cancer as well. And always, it struck me that the mountains are there for you.
They are, they're so wonderful. You can't control anything on a mountain, totally out of your control. It was kind of like a vacation for me, where I couldn't think about anything else. I couldn't think about my book, my family, whatever other health issues were going on. I just was there in the rhythm like the song of the mountain. It was glorious.
Your experiences, as you relate them, are so intense and emotionally vivid. And anybody who reads this book will really experience the depth of your brokenness, and you were so vulnerable at times. How were you able to relate that on paper?
Well, I had kept journals all during cancer, for example, and for many years before. So having some feelings and in some cases dialogue written down in my journals really helped. I think also when I go to write, it's kind of like this cone of silence comes down around me. I'm in the writing zone, and between the computer screen and me, something happens in that space, and I have to really inhabit it, with my body. So I think about, what did the air taste like? What was I hearing? What was I feeling in the body? It's a very, despite what one may think, I think writing is a very body-oriented kind of exercise, if you will.
You do have the gift of making the five senses come alive. Honestly, when I was reading your book, I would physically yell out loud, "No!"
That's wonderful. That's so gratifying, Suzette.
What's going to happen now? How's she going to get out of this? And, you really carry the reader with you up to the summit. And as deep as your sorrows are, and as difficult as your obstacles can be, each victory is shared with the reader. I mean, I actually thought, I could see him on the summit doing your happy dance.
I know. Yes, thank goodness for those peak dances.
Oh, it's really a wonderful book. We are going to take a short break, and when we return, we're going to speak more with Cheryl Suchors about her book, 48 Peaks, Hiking and Healing in the White Mountains. Stay tuned. And we're back with Cheryl Suchors, author of 48 Peaks, Hiking and Healing in the White Mountains. And I love this book, and it's so exciting to talk to her today, because I don't know that I could ever do such an incredible physical feat. So and to read her book takes you right into her backpack to the summit in ways that it's very rare to read in a book. So I want to ask you, when you started writing this, who's your audience for this book?
Well, there's several audiences I was hoping for. One is certainly anybody who's interested in the great outdoors, right? Hikers, walkers, bikers, anybody like that, or anyone who loves nature, gardeners, those kind of folks, athletic folks. But also I wanted to bring along the so-called armchair travelers, people. I've had friends who've read the book say, I've never been on a hike. I will never go on a hike, but I really enjoyed learning about it and learning a lot of the things that never occurred to me could happen or were involved in a hike. Also, obviously, any women who've had breast cancer or are in the process of going through treatment for breast cancer, I really hope to offer some inspiration and some hope for them. I mean, you know, I'm a breast cancer survivor 18 years out now, which I know when I was going through treatment, I so wanted to hear stories like that, and it was really helpful for me to hear that. I think also, I hope certainly that another audience is anybody middle-aged and older. You know, our bodies change. We all face that, and we have to decide what this next phase of life is going to be like. And I wanted to sort of show one story of how a person could still have a lot of zest in life in later years and feel alive, you know.
How tall are you, Cheryl?
Well, I used to be 5'2". Now I'm about 5 feet half an inch.
I know. I'm 4'10", and I keep thinking any more height loss, and my husband's going to have to shake the sheets to find me. But when I think about the arduous climb to the summit, and I think about, I related because you're short. You had so many physical obstacles, and yet you did it. And also what I loved was your personality that came through. You were so vulnerable in the book. In the book, you are very determined, you plan, you map things out, right? I mean, you've got all the gear figured out, you're very clear about what needs to be done, you're not afraid to speak up. And yet I found you also to be so engaging, because there were times when, of course, you were going through grief, when you were jealous. Oh yeah. When you felt jealous, or you felt insecure, or, you know, and all of those things was very encouraging to me, because you're not a superhero. You are a superhero, but in the writing, you're not. You're so clear about how you feel you're about to fail and how it's difficult for you to fail. So how was it being so vulnerable on paper as a writer?
It was challenging. I must say, the first couple of drafts, I don't think I opened up enough. It took the next couple of drafts. You know, with each draft, I'd get a little more adventuresome, and I finally just said to myself, well, you know, if you're here to tell your story and you don't tell the whole truth, what good is it? You know, who's going to take any inspiration from that? You know, I mean, it's wonderful for those people who really are superhuman. I certainly am not. But we do have some folks like that, and they do amazing things. And I was not, you know, a particularly unusual person. And yet I had goals, and I wanted to achieve them just like all of us do. I mean, we all have mountains to climb, right?
Yeah, we do. So. And I remember a very good friend and colleague, Dave Lieber, once said that people don't learn from your successes, they learn from your failures. They relate to your failures, and so therefore your successes are all the more sweet. And it was certainly my experience in reading your book.
Well, and in fact, I had one of my favorite bosses when I was first working said, on a long plane flight back from a client, we were management consultants, he said, you know, it's not people's strengths that attract me. And I was like, no? He said, no, it's their vulnerabilities. And after that, I noticed when I read, that was what really engaged me with a character.
Now, you have always been a writer. journaling, keeping detailed diaries, and I'm assuming that those proved to be invaluable for
Absolutely.
reference and going back and
Absolutely.
keeping it very fresh and immediate. We all start out writing books with an aim in mind, and then sometimes it turns out very different from where we started. Was it that experience for you, or did you have a very clear vision from the beginning how your book was going to be written?
No, I started out to write a how-to hiking book.
Oh, that's different. Okay.
It was totally different. And what changed my mind was that in my writers group, people kept saying, you know, well, what was it about your mother's death that told you you could become a writer, you could follow your dream, whatever? And I'd be like, well, what do you mean? That's not in my book, really. That's not the story I'm telling here. I kind of fought tooth and nail against writing a memoir. And I thought it was very difficult. I liken it to kind of playing piano, where you have to have both hands doing something. On the one hand, you have to be telling the truth, and you have to be in the story, right? It's your truth. But the other hand has to be making it a readable story, like fiction. And at first I just thought, oh, that's just way too hard. I'm not doing that. I'm going to write this other little book and then I'll be done. And over the many years, it changed a lot.
It did, and yet it incorporated all those very elements, because you brought into the book mountain climbing strategies that I wasn't even aware of. And you did it in a way that wasn't technical, but more, I really felt like two people hobnobbing about how we're going to get this done. And you had some really great experience to share. So we're on the subject now of the writing process. What kind of advice do you have for people who want to write a book? Maybe not necessarily a mountaineering book or mountaineering memoir, but in general, your book was one of the best I've ever read. And I'd like to know from you, what is your advice for other writers?
Well, Suzette, first I should say it took me 13 years to write this book. Not that is what I recommend. But one reason it took me so long was that I never quite got momentum. I wrote very episodically. So I'd write 1 day a week or maybe 2 days a week, and then I'd skip 3 months and not write anything. And that went on for years. So my first suggestion to folks would be, if that's true for you, if you're struggling with that, find yourself a writing program where you can go away and immerse yourself for a couple weeks, 3 weeks, a month. I did that at the Vermont Studio Center. I got a grant from them. I was so fortunate. And all around me, everybody was spending every minute of every day working on their books, or there were visual artists there, their art. And it was the first time I'd ever spent like 7 hours face to face with my book. And from that, I discovered that if you do it regularly, if you spend more hours at it, you don't have to keep starting up again, which is so difficult in sports, in writing, in life, right?
Yes, that's so true.
So I think that is one thing I would say. The other, this is a tip I learned from Elizabeth Strout, the wonderful author.
Oh, yes.
Olive Kittredge and Amy and Isabel, all that.
I read that.
I was lucky enough to have her for a class, and she used the word pruning. Prune the little twigs. And it took me a while to figure out what the heck she was talking about. But I'll give you an example. So even after my book was, I'd already gotten the first galleys of it, I saw a twig I had missed. And I was talking about hiking Mount Washington and how you could start out at the bottom in sort of semi-tropical weather. And along the way, as you got closer to the top, it could start snowing. And the sentence ended, and hikers need to be prepared for that. And I looked at that sentence and I was like, I don't need for that. It's much more powerful if it ends, hikers need to be prepared. Right? Doesn't that have
Yes.
something of a ring
Yes.
to it? You know, it just means so much
Authoritative.
more than, so that was a little twig I cut.
Yes.
That was a good tip that I got from her.
Well, you know, that is so true, because so much of book writing is editing.
Oh,
And,
so much.
and being willing to wield that machete, even though it's on our darlings. So
Yes.
I understand. And getting into the rhythm, a schedule where, because now I write, and it's automatic for me to start every morning. I don't even think about it.
That's
And I do
wonderful.
feel that if you want to get something done, you can't wait for the muse
Absolutely.
to inspire you.
So true. And the muse may come when you've been at it for 3 hours and all you can think about is lunch, but you keep yourself in the room for another half hour and something happens.
It's so true. You know, people think that inspiration comes like a magic wand at the top of your head, but it really happens on the other end. Velcro your butt to a chair and do it.
Absolutely.
And write.
Absolutely.
Now, where can we buy your book?
The good news is you can buy it anywhere books are sold. Bookstores, Targets, I think, has it now. Obviously
Amazon?
online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble.
Do you have a website, Cheryl?
I do. It's, surprisingly enough, www.CherylSuchors.com.
SUCHORS,
Yes.
CherylSuchors.com.
And Cheryl with a C.
Cheryl with a C. And so your book releases this month.
Yesterday was my publication date,
Wonderful. September
11th.
9/11 publication date. That's fantastic. So, and I know that you say you have a lot of speaking engagements, book signings in the
yes.
fall, in the coming month, and you can go to her website. You have a calendar?
Please. Yes, I have an events page, and I think there are 30 or so events listed on there. So please do come and attend a reading. I'd love to see some folks there.
And the wonderful news is that here in Milton, we will be featuring Cheryl Suchors, author of 48 Peaks, Hiking and Healing in the White Mountains, at the Milton Public Library. It will be scheduled, and so all of you will have a chance to meet her in person at a book signing and a wonderful lecture. So thank you for being with us today,
Oh, thank you, Suzette. You're so wonderful.
and we'll see you next time on It's All Right with Suzette.